Good morning. What a song. That one always undoes me. So part of our Thanksgiving service this morning, we are going to take a look at the 20 years that Antigo Community Church has had a home on Deleglise Street. And there's so much to say about that. We're going to have a quick overview with some pictures here. But 20 years is an anniversary worth celebrating. I was working in the church office at the time, doing similar to what Adriana does now. So I had a front row seat to a lot of the things that were happening. I'm going to share a condensed version with you this morning of how it all came to be and what God did for us. In the Psalms we read, "One generation will commend God's works to another. They will tell of God's mighty acts. And we will tell the next generation," that's me telling you, "the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power, and the wonders he has done, so the next generation will know them, and they in turn will tell their children. Then they will put their trust in God and not forget his deeds, but would keep his commands." And that is what I hope will happen in sharing this story today. This is not the only story of God working at Antigo, but this is our story. So let's go back to the year 2005. If you can imagine what you were doing that year, 20 years ago. Some of you were just planning to be born. But our president was George W. Bush in his second term. 2005 was the year of Hurricane Katrina. The first YouTube videos came out in 2005, and Google Maps was launched. So it's a little bit of what was happening in the world 20 years ago. But as far as our church goes, how did a Protestant church come to make its home in a former Catholic facility? So we're going to take a quick look at the history of ACC. ACC as it exists today is the result of a merger of two churches that started 40 and 50 years ago. So we're going to go back a little bit further. In 1982, a group of single young people, started meeting for a Bible study in a converted garage on First Ave. By 1984, the group had grown large enough to purchase a small warehouse building that still exists on 10th Avenue. Today, it's the home of North Central Caravans. The 10th Avenue building was remodeled and expanded with volunteer labor, and the church was called Grace Fellowship at that time. We have some people from those earliest days who still attend ACC. That would be Jim and Kate Robb and Jeff and Deb Marshall. There was others from our congregation who came to that church later, but those two couples were there at the very beginning. By 1992, they became a part of the Evangelical Free Church of America, the denomination we're still affiliated with, and adopted the name Antigo Evangelical Free Church. Pastor Jim Gazelle was called as the pastor in 1994. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Maranatha Baptist Church was organized in 1974, and they were meeting on the corner of 7th Ave and Edison Street, which is now the home of Antigo Christ Gospel Church. People from the Maranatha Church who still attend ACC today would include Keith and Lori Cunningham and Terry and Nancy Pfluger. In 1996, which is almost 30 years ago now, the two churches merged and became known as Antigo Community Church, and worship services were held at the 10th Avenue facility. But by the year 2000, ACC had outgrown that 10th Avenue facility, so for 5 years, from 2000 to 2005, we met at the Antigo High School. God worked out a variety of arrangements in those 5 years. There was a lot of changing that happened for us to use the Vohm Theater, the Commons, several classrooms on Sunday morning. Youth clubs were held all over town, including some elementary schools, the middle school, the building that is now the Boys and Girls Club. Some highlights of our years meeting in the Antigo High School from 2000 to 2005 include honoring Pastor Jim Gazelle for 30 years in ministry. He wasn't here 30 years, but he had been a pastor for 30 years. We had several Christmas cantatas in the Vohm Theater under the musical direction of Nancy Pfluger. And this is some pictures of one of them. But, there were several of those. And we also had a community prayer service following 9/11, which of course was in 2001. But knowing that the high school wouldn't be our permanent home, plans were started to build a new facility. The first building committee met in May of 2001, and land was purchased outside of Antigo in 2002. At least 2 different building committees were formed to research building plans and costs, but the results were very discouraging. We just couldn't afford to build a facility large enough to meet our needs. Meanwhile, the Catholic community in Antigo was facing the need to downsize from 3 parishes to 2. When approached with the possibility of purchasing a historic church building, the building committees were initially not interested. But over the next 4 years, as the cost of building a new facility became increasingly prohibitive and the purchase price of these buildings was lowered, the possibility of buying an existing facility looked more and more promising. Members of the final building committee who recommended the purchase of these properties included Jeff Marshall, Rob McClellan, and Dennis Bula. So multiple groups from ACC toured the facilities. Our Catholic friends from St. Mary's were, were very patient as we requested yet another tour and asked yet another question. Slowly, we let go of our dreams of what our new church home would look like and embraced another vision. After a lot of prayer, endless meetings, discussions, and a lot of hard work, ACC voted in early 2005 to purchase the former St. Mary's Church and parochial school. Pastor Jim carefully led us through a capital campaign to raise funds, and members of the elder board in 2005, who had to provide a lot of leadership for this decision, who are still attending ACC today, include Jerry Rice, Greg Parise, Terry Pfluger, and Jeff Marshall. And Jerry Rice served as chairman during this time. Others who served in leadership during these days have either moved away or passed away. So that's a quick overview of how we got here. And now let's take a quick look at the history of these buildings. The building in which we are sitting now was built in 1901. And here's a picture of, I think it was the day they laid the cornerstone for this building. You can still see that as you leave the front door and turn to the right on that northwestern corner. There's a 1901 cornerstone. This building served the Bohemian or Czech immigrants who came to this area. Mary Deleglise, wife of Francis Deleglise, the founder of Antigo, donated the land for the church. And as you know, the street in front of the church is called Deleglise. Deleglise is a French name meaning of the church or pertaining to the church. Mary Deleglise's name is on a stained glass window right over here to my right, in recognition of her work in getting this building built. The church building was originally red brick, as shown in this 1917 postcard. So the stucco exterior was installed over the red brick in the late 30s or early 40s. The original slate roof on the church remains in place today. And notice the street in front of the church. I think that's Antigo's first and only traffic circle. The school building, which we call the Quest Center, was built in 2 stages in the 1950s. We renamed it the Quest Center because that was the name of the high school youth group at the time. As a side note, 2 of our current members used to teach in that building, Terry Zinchuk and Sue Marzak. And there are probably others of you attending today who attended church or school in these buildings when you were growing up. So that's a little of the background. Now our move here. The purchase of our new church home was complicated. Over the course of 7 months in 2005, with the sale of our existing properties and the acquisition of our new property, we had a total of 6 separate real estate transactions. Dave Klasing, who has since passed away, was given the responsibility of negotiating all of the real estate sales and purchases. The church and school buildings were sold to us in 2 separate transactions. The worship center here was purchased in May of 2005 with cash, and renovations began almost immediately. Meanwhile, the school building, the Quest Center, was still in use till the end of the school year, so we couldn't purchase that one till the end of June. The Quest Center was purchased with cash and a mortgage, which was paid off in 2017. The school building, or the Quest Center, required no remodeling to move in, but extensive work has been done in the past 20 years, including roof repair and replacement, heating system repair and replacement, new ceilings, new windows, new flooring, and painting. The most recent upgrade is the new windows installed in the cross-trainer room. Many men, too many to mention here, from the congregation have helped with these projects over the last 20 years. And you as a congregation have given generously and sacrificially for these various upgrades. It's been encouraging to see God work through you for both the purchase and the maintenance of these buildings. The worship center remodeling was extensive. Jerry Wilhelm acted as liaison to the general contractor, who was Dave Nicholson Construction. The basement of the church has formerly been described by both children and adults as scary. And there was one bathroom in this facility in a tiny little corner in the basement. Even adults didn't want to go down there. So the basement got a total makeover, and if you haven't ever been down there, it now includes a nursery and 2 classrooms, new bathrooms, new furnaces, and electrical service. Well, they were new 20 years ago. On the main floor, bathrooms were added, new stairs to the balcony was installed, and a cry room was added. Much of the original woodwork, like the wainscoting in this room and the doors, were refinished and included in the project. New flooring, new lighting, a new sound system, and projectors were added. The sanctuary walls were repainted, and the stenciling up above was left intact. Also left intact were the stained glass windows. After a lot of back and forth discussion and multiple plans that never materialized, the windows remain today as part of the history of this building and a history of the community. Some of them depict biblical stories, others represent various parts of church history or tradition, but they all remind us that church history didn't start with us, and it won't end with us. Our last service in the Wilhelm Theater was on July 3rd of 2005. We moved our meager belongings into the school building on July 4th, and we had our first worship service over in the gym or cafeteria of the Quest Center on July 10th. Fortunately for us, St. Mary's had left some chairs with the facility because having used the Wilhelm Theater for 5 years, we didn't even own enough folding chairs to seat our congregation. So when you see the blue folding chairs around here, those were left, they were part of the purchase, and we were very thankful for them. I think that summer was one of the hottest summers on record as we worshiped in the cafeteria over there. Our first worship team that day consisted of 5 members of the Duke family, who are probably all hunting today. Brennan, Kelly, Nathan, Tyler, and Joel Duke. We continued to use the gym for worship services from July until October 16th, when we had our first worship service here in the worship center. Todd Stensberg was the worship leader that day, and he remembers how good it sounded to hear the congregation singing in this room. A dedication service and open house then were held on November 6th of that year, and Tom Duke was our worship leader that day. It's fun to remember what some of the worship songs were from 20 years ago. They include songs like God is Good All the Time, Lord, I Lift Your Name on High, Shine, Jesus, Shine, and Days of Elijah. So those were some of the songs we were singing that summer. The reaction of the greater Antigo community to our purchasing this property was encouraging. I feel we became more of a community church by occupying a facility that was long known for Christian worship. Having our own facilities meant that we could conduct our youth clubs in one place, no longer renting or borrowing space and moving equipment and supplies each week. We could also host weddings and funerals, things that were hard to do when we didn't own a facility. We are also able in the Quest Center to provide space for the senior citizen meal site, Meals on Wheels, and community groups like TOPS and Al-Anon. There's also plenty of room for our own ministries that reach out into the community, like Momco and their Daddy-Daughter Dance, and of course, again, all our youth groups. The whole community, whether Catholic or Protestant, seemed encouraged that this building would continue as a house of worship. And that is part of a national trend. A recent article in Christianity Today magazine reported on a nationwide pattern of the closure of Catholic parishes, with those buildings being purchased by other denominations. They also mentioned the sadness of the congregations that had to close, but their happiness that the building would continue as a church. We were actually on the cutting edge of that trend 20 years ago. Some highlights of our first 20 years on Deleglise Street include the Gazelle's mission trip. Jim and Kathy Gazelle took a trip with Don Shire to India in 2011, which led to an orphan sponsor project in our congregation. We had a retirement banquet for Pastor Jim and Kathy in 2013. Then interim pastor Larry Schwark came in 2013, led us through a pastor search, and brought Pastor Kellen Lewis and his family in 2014. Mission Antigo was started in 2016. Adriana was hired in 2019. And in 2021, the congregation voted to have Steve Sanford and Todd Stensberg serve as our co-pastors. This is indeed a condensed version, but those were have been some of the highlights of the last 20 years. So that's the story of how we arrived here on Deleglise Street and where we are in 2025. It's a lot of details I had to leave out for the sake of time. But I'd like to leave you with 4 expectations as ACC moves forward into the next 20 years. What should ACC expect before 2045? The first one is we should expect change. There's always a lot of turnover in the congregation. It's been encouraging to see new people come to Christ, to grow in their faith, and be part of ACC. It's also encouraging to see the leadership pass to the next generation. I believe that every ministry leader who was serving in 2005 has passed the baton to a new, younger generation. Another kind of change is more sobering. Many of the people involved in this process 20 years ago are no longer with us. Some have chosen to worship elsewhere or have moved away, but many have gone to be with the Lord. Some of you will remember names like Cardin Stevenson, Dave and Marilyn Clasing, Jerry Wilhelm, Dave Evu. It's sobering and humbling to realize that many of us will join them with the Lord in the next 20 years. Expect change in how ministry is done. Look at all the ways media and technology are part of ministry now. 20 years ago, we were not live streaming our services, and there's just so much that has changed for the better with the use of technology. On a more humorous note, some changes still take a long time. Whenever I'm talking with a friend and they ask, where do you go to church? And I say, Antigo Community. Where's that? And if I say, oh, we bought the former St. Mary's Church. Oh, yeah. So 20 years later, that's still a touchstone, and some changes just take a long time. We should expect challenges. That's another thing we should expect. In looking back over 20 years of history, remembering all that the Lord has done, it might be easy to give the impression that everything went smoothly. It did not. There were lots of hard conversations, long meetings, hard discussions, much prayer. There were weeks and months when it felt like we would never have a facility. There were times of profound disappointment and deep hurts. It was not an easy time to be on the building committee or the elder board. A few members disagreed so strongly with the plan to purchase this property that, like Paul and Barnabas in Acts, they chose to part ways and went to worship elsewhere. Others who disagreed with some of the details of the purchase made their feelings known, but in the end chose to follow the leadership of the elder board and the vote of the congregation, and they stayed without grumbling and complaining. These were hard days, but God continued to work among us. We should continue to expect expect that God will provide. As we entered the process of purchasing the property, we did not know how God would provide, but he did. We sold our 10th Avenue property, as well as the land we had intended to build on, in an amazingly short time, and for more money than we could have imagined. We were able to purchase this building with cash, I think to do the renovations as well. The mortgage that we had on the Quest Center building was paid off early. In addition, members of the congregation gave generously and sacrificially, and God has continued to provide during these past 20 years through your giving. So expect that God will provide, even though you don't know ahead of time how he's going to do that. And finally, expect that God will be with us. We're about to enter the Advent season in preparation for Christmas. One of the names of Jesus is Emmanuel, meaning God with us. And one of the wonders of Christmas is that God came down to us. We should expect that God will be with us in the future, as he has been in the past. As we close this story of how ACC came to this location 20 years ago, the worship team is going to lead us in a song that says what I want to leave you with. Never once did we ever walk alone. Never once did God leave us on our own. God is faithful. God is faithful. Let's sing about that.